We are truly blessed here this evening, as you can see and look around this area. But we have someone here with us who has been working internationally for the Indian government for a number of years. And sorry, if I'm going to call that number, we might want to question what are your secrets to the physical fitness, so we won't put a number there. But we would say that the Honorable Minister Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar was a member of the India Foreign Service who served as a former Indian ambassador to the US, China, and Czech Republic, the High Commissioner to Singapore, Foreign Secretary to the Ministry of External Affairs, along with several other key positions in Sri Lanka, Hungary, Russia, and Japan. He graduated from Delhi University's St. Stephen's College and holds 2 master's degrees, one in political science and the other in international relations. He also has a PhD in international relations from Jawaharlal Nehru University with a specialization in nuclear diplomacy. His father, K. Subramaniam, was the author of India's nuclear doctrine. He was the chief architect of the India-US nuclear deal and is known to defend India and Indian foreign policy across the world, with many of his speeches gone viral because of his mic drop responses, acquiring millions of admirers across the world. I humbly request the Honorable Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar to give his remarks at this time.
Vice President Dr. Bharat Jagdev, Honorable Speaker, former President Donald Ramatar, Cabinet Ministers, Members of Parliament, dear friends. It's really for me a matter of great pleasure to be in Guyana, and I don't say this as a diplomatic phrase. I don't say this because today I went to the monument for Indian arrival. I looked at a set of statues which all of you are familiar with, and for me the expressions, the posture, the underlying sentiment, it brought home to me that I was really in a very special country, in a very special society. Earlier in the morning, I had joined members of the community at Sri Ramakrishna Temple, and there too I had the opportunity to observe that there were objects of worship which those who had come here without really knowing where they were going had carried with them, because in a sense this was the home that they brought here. Now I mention this because for a lot of us in India, when we look at those societies which have been forged over a century, in this case over 180 years, by those who went out with so much courage, with so much fortitude, with such a belief in their ability to survive and do well in a completely foreign environment, I can only communicate to you that, we look at that diaspora with an enormous sense of admiration. And your successes, your challenges, sometimes your travails, are certainly very much in the heart of people in India. And so when we speak today of a tradition of good relations, I can say that pretty much for every country in the world. But I do want to say, when I come to Guyana, that it is something much deeper, something much closer, something much more emotional. And in many ways, my presence here today is an expression of that. Now, I've been here 3 years, and I'm sure some of you at least are wondering what I have been doing with myself. Well, to start with, I have spent time with the Honorable Vice President and the Honorable Speaker, with many of the ministers, with the President, and our discussions really were about how to forge a partnership between Guyana and India which was fit for purpose in the contemporary era. And the immediate, I would say, the motivation, the catalyst for this exercise was actually 2 very important visits we had, visits from President Irfan Ali and from Vice President Bharat Jagdev, which, if at the risk of embarrassing the Vice President, I would say really have had a kind of an electric impact on the relationship. So it's always been a very good relationship between us. We have always, as we've watched Guyana progress, as we've seen the various developments, political, economic, social here, there's always been a sort of a fair amount of attention and focus where India is concerned. But I want to say that, thank you, something actually has changed. Something has changed for the better. There is today an energy and a focus and a commitment in the relationship, which I can say as someone who's been around a long time, as the MC very politely was trying to say, which for me is really quite remarkable. Now, what is it that has changed? From an Indian perspective, actually, we see a Guyana which is poised to enter a new era, which is looking at prospects and a potential which perhaps it could not have imagined a decade ago, and for whom partnerships, time-tested partnerships and old friendships and strong relationships could have a very different meaning. That a Guyana which is really girding itself up to play a much more prominent role in the region, perhaps in the global economy, it is also a Guyana which is ready for a higher level of partnership with a country like India. A second factor is, in a sense, an empathy between what is happening in India and what we see is happening in this country. I'd be very happy perhaps to address some of the aspects of the transformation later when we get into, we have a question answer interactive session. But if I were to sum up in a sense the outlook in India, it is really an outlook, when we talk about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, which is really, and Sabka Prayas, which is really a collective effort, a non-discriminatory effort, a national effort, really to build society. But it's not just the effort which is there. There is, for the Modi government, a very profound commitment to what is called ease of living, which is to approach the governance process through the eyes of the average citizen, to see what it is we can do to make people's living easier, to make the delivery of services more effective, to relieve the ordinary person of the difficulties of dealing with the system, if you would. And when we look at what we are doing in India, certainly a lot of what today I see the government in Guyana trying to do. I think it resonates with us. Now it resonates with us also because many of the efforts underway in India, they clearly are, obviously this is India, so they're on a very big scale. But it's not just the scale. We think many of them also have a resonance, have an application, have a relevance beyond India. And some of that in terms of new capacities, new, I would say, new technologies, a different confidence. Those changes in India, I've been very, I would say, impressed to see that in some way or the other they're actually reflecting on the Indo-Guyanese relationship. And I'll give you a few examples. Just before this, I was with His Excellency the President as he was inaugurating a new ferry which had been received from India. This ferry, I believe, if I get the details wrong, please forgive me, I'm only 3 days old in this society, but I'm told it would connect to Region 1 in a very efficient way. It has the potential really to transform the movement of people, the movement of goods, the economies, in a sense, the sociology of this country. Not just of this country. If this ferry is followed up with additional orders, it could actually have a larger implication even in respect of neighbors like Trinidad and Tobago. So for me, the fact that a ferry made in India could come to Guyana, become immediately relevant to important local needs, have an impact on the everyday life of people. This to me is actually the foreign policy that I have been mandated to practice by Prime Minister Modi, which is a foreign policy not just to better the lives of the Indian people, but really to better the lives of the international community, but looking at it really from a human-centric point of view. A second example of this was also, I took time off between my meetings yesterday to go and visit a project which is happening as we speak in this country. It's a road building project. And as I discovered, look, as someone who's only traveled on roads, I mean, you ask yourself, how hard is it? How hard can it be to build a road? And I learnt yesterday that it can be very hard to build a road because there are often very complex challenges of terrain and of geology and geography which need to be addressed. But I cite this to you as examples today of how the relationship is actually making itself felt in very, very practical terms. Yesterday evening, the President was gracious enough to host an event in my honor. And I also had a chance at the end of the evening to meet a bunch of service officers who had been trained in India, Guyanese service officers. And I reflected on that because again, I can see today how much the training and the exchanges, the capability programs that we do, what an impact it is actually having in a partner country. So, yes, I know there are interesting, WhatsApp messages and, these argumentative clips, but I do want to tell you that life really is much more than just about arguments and positions. What we do make a real difference in societies. When we speak about friendship, this is not a phrase it is not even just a sentiment. It is something which actually, if translated into reality with dedication and commitment, can make a very big difference to the lives of people. Now, I have spoken at some length about what we are doing between India and Guyana, but I'd like to put it to you all in a certain context, because we are in different parts of the world, and it's not just the distance which is a factor. I mean, of course, there are commonalities of history and ethnicity, but there is also the context of how the world is changing. And the world today, if any of us were to look at the last, 3-4 years, we have seen events happen around us which none of us could have imagined. Events which have impacted every one of us personally, but events from which it is extremely important to draw lessons. And let me start actually with the biggest event, which is a once-in-a-century event, COVID. Now, yes, COVID came, some people would say it's gone, it's not entirely gone. Yes, we helped each other, all of us during that period. India, for example, sent vaccines out to a number of countries, not just vaccines, but other medicines as well. But there are lessons to be drawn from that. There are lessons to be drawn about health security, about health spending, about health preparation. So when I speak about a foreign policy which is aimed at making the lives of people better, today for me, when I come to Guyana, part of the discussions I've had with the Honorable Vice President and the President was really what can we do in terms of our partnership to contribute to capabilities here, because at some time, it won't be the same pandemic, but at some time it is very likely that some similar challenge would come. And what that challenge showed was that in a sense, a lot of countries kind of built walls, they protected themselves behind what they thought were national barriers. And much of the world was left to fend for itself, and surely we cannot allow that to happen again. And that really means that every region in some way must have at least a basic ability to secure its health. A second problem, which I must tell you, I personally experienced at that time, was actually something even more basic, which was of food. Because supply chains were disrupted, because shipping was disrupted, because air freighters didn't run, actually there were regions of the world which worried about where their next meal would come. I mean, I can still remember, because it was around the same time, it was Ramzan time at that time, and you had a number of Gulf countries, for example, worrying because they were crucially dependent on food exports from India. So a second big lesson from that period is actually food security. And then there is the further lesson, which is even if you were to put health and food aside for a moment, that we had all actually slipped into a globalization model which made us extremely vulnerable to risks in a few parts of the world. So if you were to ask me today, what is actually a core aspect of the foreign policy that I apply myself to, it is actually to de-risk the global economy, to make sure, God forbid, that if something happens tomorrow, that each one of us in different corners of the world have that ability to cope with it better than we did in the last 4 years. And I am saying this to you at some length because if on top of this you add the consequences, the implications, the repercussions of what happened from the Ukraine conflict, the energy problems, the food price increases, the fertilizer problem, we are actually looking at a world where in fact the uncertainties have risen very sharply, And some of it are immediate actions, but in a way, quite honestly, I think the world is also paying for its sins. What we are seeing in terms of increasingly frequent climate events of greater intensity with each year. There was a period when we thought of a cyclone or some kind of natural disaster as the exceptional event of that era. What we are actually seeing is almost every year, sometimes more often than that, you have a major climate event somewhere, and these today need to be factored in as we try to run a more efficient and a more effective international order. So I see these really as the larger context in which there is a very strong case for India and Guyana to forge a closer relationship. I can see already in the last few years, we are beginning at a practical level. I mean, trade, for example, has gone up because Guyana has become an energy exporter. Health, trade has also gone up because the demand for pharmaceuticals and health-related imports from India to Guyana have also gone up. We need to look at these common concerns, as I said, concerns about health, concerns about security, concerns even about wellness, because again, wellness is something which we take much more seriously after all being cooped up during the COVID period. So there is a very, I would say, a different agenda out there, an agenda which can be advanced because today you have two governments who in many ways approach their respective societies in a human-centric manner with the welfare of the people at heart, trying to see whether their partnership can deliver for the relationship. So that is really what has been the purpose of my mission. I can say that in many ways I go back both satisfied in a way, but also definitely motivated, but in some ways also challenged, because I think the more we discussed in the last few days, I see really a far bigger agenda than perhaps I saw when I came into this country 3 days ago. So what I can say to you very confidently, that this relationship clearly is going to very move to a completely different level. Some of the examples I cited to you are just harbingers of what is to come. But I would conclude again by returning to the beginning of my remarks, which is for us, Guyana is a very special partner. It's a partner because in many ways it's the shared traditions, the heritage, the culture, and all of this is underpinned by a belief really in societal and political values. I would say that it's always important to remember that as pluralistic societies and as political democracies, as market economies, we share really the fundamental principles, and countries that do have the ability to work together much more closely than those that don't. So once again, I'm really thankful to all of you that you have joined me this evening. I'm very appreciative of the Vice President and the Speaker that they too have made time. Once again, I want to say I'm really extremely pleased, very happy at being amongst you today, and I look forward to coming back hopefully in the not very distant future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar.